My name is Gabrielle Travers, Gabe for short. I'm 36 years old, and I serve as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. I've done 3 deployments, led joint operations overseas, and trained some of the toughest units on the East Coast. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I quietly came home from deployment. I landed stateside on a red-eye flight. No one knew I was returning. That was on purpose. I had a few days of leave, and I wanted to surprise my family. Mostly, I wanted to see my grandfather, Clarence Briggs. He raised me when no one else would. He's the reason I became the woman I am. The ride from the airport was quiet. I watched trees blur past in the dark. There was a hollow pit in my chest, but I couldn't tell why. Call it instinct. In the Army, you learn to listen when the silence feels off. I pulled up to the house just after 5 in the morning. All the lights were off. The front porch was damp. I noticed the flower beds were unwatered, the driveway unswept, and something in me tightened. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. Rang again. Still nothing. I unlocked the door with the spare key hidden beneath the chipped garden gnome, the same one Grandpa used to joke was uglier than his war sergeant. Inside, the house was cold, quiet. But not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind of silence that creeps under your skin. I called out, "Grandpa!" No answer. I walked into the kitchen. A half-eaten microwave meal sat on the counter. The trash hadn't been taken out in days. I checked every room, empty. No note, no sign of recent life. Just an old cardigan draped over his recliner and a photo of the 2 of us taped to the fridge. I stepped outside and asked the neighbor, Mrs. Halpern, if she'd seen him. She looked at me like I should have known. "Oh, honey, they took him to county hospital nearly 2 weeks ago. Chest pains. He collapsed in the backyard. I thought your mother would have told you." I didn't answer. I just got back in the car and drove. By the time I reached County General, the sun was rising. I walked straight into ICU, still in uniform, boots dusty from Baghdad, with a duffel over one shoulder and my military ID clenched in one fist. Room 317. There he was, lying in bed, unconscious. Tubes in his arms, machines tracking every breath, oxygen hissing through his nose, and absolutely no one else around. A nurse came over, surprised. "You must be Gabrielle. You're the first family member to visit since he was admitted," I asked. "Where's everyone else?" She hesitated. "Your mother signed the intake form, but she left 10 minutes later, said they had a flight." "A flight?" I asked. She nodded. "Hawaii? Told us to call if his condition changed." That's when my phone buzzed. 1 call, then 2, then 3 in a row. I stepped into the hallway, opened my messages. First thing I saw was an Instagram story. My younger sister Cam, in a bikini, drink in hand, captioned, "When life gets heavy, we get lighter. Mahalo, Maui." I checked the call log. No missed messages about Grandpa. No updates. Nothing from Mom. Nothing from Reed, my stepfather. Just charge alerts on the family card for massages, cocktails, and private beach excursions. And that was when I made one phone call. Just one. Not to them. To someone who actually mattered. I dialed Marcus, my former JAG contact, now a private attorney. I gave him the full picture. Grandpa's condition, his absence of care, the financial records, the power of attorney he'd had notarized and mailed to me months earlier. Marcus said, "If you're ready, we'll move immediately. Do you want to freeze the accounts?" "Yes," I replied. 1 hour, he said. "That's all I need." Exactly 1 hour later, my phone lit up. 25 missed calls. From Mom, from Cam, from Reed. But I didn't answer. Because they had already made their decision. 2 weeks ago. They abandoned a man who never once abandoned them. And now, it was my turn to stand between him and the people who left him for dead. Not with rage, but with resolve. The house hadn't changed, but it had. I stood in the doorway, the key still warm from my hand. The hinges groaned like they were waking from a long nap. Dust hung in the air like fog, thick and unmoved. The air was stale, but underneath the neglect, I could still smell him. A faint trace of aftershave and old paperbacks. Familiar, intimate. It hit me so hard I had to hold the doorknob just to stay steady. I stepped in slowly, boots echoing on the hardwood floor. The living room was frozen in time. The recliner by the window sat empty, slightly tilted, with a folded wool blanket still resting over one arm. His reading glasses were on the end table, next to an unopened bottle of his heart medication. It was like he'd just stepped out and never came back. I walked past the kitchen where the sink was dry, dishes stacked neatly. No signs of dinner, no mugs in the drying rack. That man made tea every morning. The kettle was cold. Then it happened. As I turned the corner into the hallway, my duffel caught on the edge of a bookshelf and something fell with a soft thud. It was the photo album, leather-bound, cracked at the corners. I picked it up and opened to a random page. There I was, maybe 8 years old, standing on top of a faded red tractor. Grandpa was behind me, hands loosely on the wheel, smiling like nothing in the world could go wrong. We were on the edge of our property in Indiana, in the middle of a field. I could still hear his voice that day, calm and steady as I gripped the wheel. Family isn't about blood, he told me. It's about who stays when you're hurting. I sat down right there on the floor, legs crossed, uniform wrinkling beneath me, and turned through page after page. Every memory was a quiet miracle. Me in my softball uniform, him holding a snow shovel taller than I was. The 4th of July cookout where he burned the burgers but still insisted they were medium well. I didn't cry, I just closed the album and held it against my chest for a long time. Then I stood up and went to the office. That was Grandpa's space. Neat, organized, sacred. The desk was clean, the surface wiped down, but the trash bin was full. I reached in, sorting through receipts and envelopes. That's when I found it. An itinerary printout from Kona Airways. Departure, March 12th. Destination, Honolulu, Hawaii. Passengers, Lillian Briggs, Camden Briggs, Reed Lawson. I stared at it for a long time. The departure date was 12 days ago, the exact day Grandpa was admitted to the hospital. They left him, no nurse rotation planned, no power of attorney updates, no family emergency contacts listed. They just left. Next to the itinerary was a hotel confirmation for 4 nights at a beachfront resort, spa packages, champagne welcome, all-inclusive. I felt the stillness of the room close in around me. I could hear the quiet buzz of the old wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. My hands were steady as I laid the papers out on the desk. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was documenting. I was preparing. I opened Grandpa's desk drawer, the one he always locked when I was younger. He kept the key behind the photo of Grandma, taped inside the frame. I reached for it, pulled open the drawer, and found a sealed envelope labeled Gabrielle. Inside, there was nothing more than a blank note card and one single sentence written in his shaky but unmistakable handwriting. If you're reading this, then you already know. Yes, I did. I knew everything I needed to. I sat in the dim corner of the ICU waiting room, elbows on my knees, phone in my hands, staring at the screen like it owed me answers. I hadn't slept in over 24 hours. My boots still had sand in the treads, but none of that mattered. Not anymore. What mattered was the silence. I tapped my mother's name and hit call. 1 ring, 2, straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Lillian Briggs. Leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can. I didn't leave a message. I tried again. This time, Cam, my sister. Younger by 8 years, more self-absorbed by 100. It didn't even ring, just a red call failed. I blinked, my jaw clenched. I switched over to Instagram. Her page loaded instantly, top of her story reel. A slow-motion video of Cam spinning in a hammock between 2 palm trees, laughing. The caption in all lowercase, I needed this break, self-care. That's when the sound of Grandpa's oxygen monitor reached my ears again. Soft, rhythmic, mechanical. Unlike their silence, it never failed. It never ignored. It never chose convenience over care. I pulled up my banking app next. Grandpa had linked me to the joint account years ago, back when he had his first fall and needed someone to help manage bills. I rarely touched it, just monitored the statements. But now I wanted to know everything. Transaction history loaded. My thumb scrolled through line after line of charges. Hibiscus Spa, 460 Ocean View Retreat Resort, $299 luau excursion package, $575 champagne room upgrade, $300 massage bliss, 220, all within the last 7 days. I tapped to sort by date. March 12th, the day Grandpa collapsed. Ocean View Resort, check-in, confirmed. March 13th, emergency room admission. March 14th, full body, hot stone massage. Each line felt like a betrayal. Not just financial, not just moral, but personal. Each dollar spent was a moment they could have been here, could have held his hand, could have done the bare minimum. Instead, they chose paradise. I went back into Grandpa's room. He looked smaller now, sunken into the mattress like he'd given up trying to stay visible. I sat beside him, placed my phone on the tray table, and held his hand. It was warm, but frail, and trembling. Not physically, but in presence. Like if I blinked too long, I might miss his last breath. I reached into my duffel bag and pulled out his leather-bound notebook. He always wrote in it, lists, prayers, thoughts, half-finished letters. I hadn't opened it since coming home. I hadn't wanted to feel what I already feared. The pages crackled as I turned through them, and then I found it. Midway through, tucked between 2 grocery lists and a recipe for blueberry cornbread, was a note written in shaking cursive, just one paragraph. Guy Gabriel, if you ever read this, don't say anything to them. Let them see it themselves. Let them feel it without your help. That's the only way it sticks. Some things can't be taught, only revealed. The pen had pressed too hard. The ink was darker than the rest. The writing trailed downward, like his hand was too tired to finish. I ran my fingers across the page. The impression of his intent was etched into the paper. Into me. He knew they would fail him. He knew I would return. And he knew I'd want justice. But he also knew silence could be louder than fury. I closed the notebook, my grip tightening just slightly, and looked at him again. No machines were beeping in alarm. No nurses rushed in. No heart monitor spiked. Just the slow, steady rhythm of a man who had held our entire family together and been discarded the moment it got inconvenient. The call that should have come never did. So now I wasn't waiting for anyone to explain themselves. I had already begun writing a story of my own. And this time, they were going to feel every line. The phone call didn't even last 5 minutes. I stepped outside the ICU into the quiet hallway where the vending machines hummed and the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects. My phone was already in my hand, screen still glowing from the bank charges. I scrolled down to a name I hadn't dialed in years, Marcus Livin. He used to be JAG, a military lawyer I worked with during my deployment in Kosovo. Now he was in private practice, handling estate law and elder protection cases. He owed me a favor, or two. He answered on the second ring. "Lieutenant Colonel Travers," he said. "Haven't heard that voice in too long. What's going on?" I skipped the pleasantries. "Marcus, my grandfather is in critical condition. He's been alone in the hospital for almost 2 weeks. My family left the country the same day he was admitted." A beat of silence. Then, "Tell me everything." I laid it all out. His condition, the hospital records, the account activity, the paper trail from their luxury vacation. But then I paused. Something had been scratching at the back of my mind. I asked, "Can you check if Grandpa ever filed a power of attorney?" Marcus typed as I spoke. I could hear the clicks through the phone. Then he said, "Well, I'll be damned. Clarence Briggs submitted a notarized POA 2 months ago. Health and financial, signed and witnessed. Effective immediately. You're the sole agent listed, Gabe." I froze. "What?" "It was filed with our office on February 10th, he said. "Clarence named you primary decision-maker for all medical and financial matters in the event he became incapacitated." "But he never told me." "He did now." My stomach twisted. I looked back through the small glass window into Grandpa's room. He wasn't just prepared for this. He had counted on me being the one to carry it through. I had been overseas. I'd missed birthdays, anniversaries, and the signs that he'd begun to prepare for something like this. And yet, he'd trusted me. Quietly, fully. "Send me the documents," I said. "Already in your inbox. I'll courier a hard copy to the hospital right now with legal certification. Tell them from now on, they answer to you." I hung up and opened my email. There it was, a full copy of the power of attorney, legally binding, cleanly signed, witnessed, and dated. Grandpa's handwriting looked strong then. Clear. As if he'd written it without hesitation. I walked back to the nurse's station. The head nurse, an older woman named Janice with kind eyes and tired shoulders, looked up. "Can I help you, Major?" "Lieutenant Colonel," I corrected gently. Then I placed the packet in front of her. "This is a certified power of attorney, medical and financial. Clarence Briggs assigned me as his legal guardian. Effective 2 months ago." She flipped through the pages. Her eyes moved quickly, trained to spot official seals, witness signatures. Her expression shifted from skeptical to respectful. "I'll make sure this is uploaded into his file immediately." "Good," I said, "because from now on, everything goes through me." Her tone softened. "He's lucky to have someone like you." "No," I replied, glancing toward his room. "I'm the one who's lucky." Janice nodded once and picked up the phone to alert the attending physician. I stood there, steady, composed, just like I'd been trained to do. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time since landing, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. I wasn't just his granddaughter anymore. I was his voice. I returned to his bedside, notebook still in my hands. I opened it again to the line he had written me. "Let them see it themselves." I had seen enough, and I would make sure they did too. Not with shouting, not with threats, but with truth, with the law, with my name, now signed where theirs used to be. One phone call. That's all it took. Exactly 1 hour after submitting the power of attorney, my phone lit up. At first, it was just one call, from Mom. I watched it ring, felt my jaw clench, and let it pass. Then another, from Cam. A third, Reed. I didn't even flinch. Then they came in waves. By the time I glanced again, the number had climbed. 10 missed calls, 15, 20, 25. I didn't pick up a single one. Instead, I opened our family group chat, the same thread they used to send passive-aggressive memes and discount codes for matching pajamas. I typed out a single message. "He's alive. You are legally out. Don't call again." And I hit send. Then I muted the thread. No exclamation points, no explanations, just the truth and the boundary. I looked out the window beside Grandpa's bed. The sun was beginning to fall behind the trees. The light coming through was soft, like forgiveness. But I wasn't ready for that word, not yet. The machine at his bedside beeped steadily, his pulse unchanged. Somehow that consistency grounded me. While everything else was spinning, bank statements, Instagram stories, voicemail silence, this machine reminded me of what mattered. I sat beside him, phone face down now, and let myself remember. Not a month ago, not even this year. I remembered a phone call from 3 years earlier. I was deployed in Kandahar, mid-rotation, running logistics for a joint convoy. We were operating under blackout conditions, so communication was rare. But that day, I had exactly 9 minutes of satellite signal and a borrowed line. I used it to call home. I still remember the static at the beginning of the call, the delay. Then Mom's voice. "Gabe, are you okay?" "Why are you calling from that number?" I asked about Grandpa. I had seen a message in his handwriting that seemed shaky. I wanted to know if he was declining. Her voice had gone stiff. "He's fine. You worry too much. Focus on your job." I had pressed a little. He sounded off. "Is he eating? Is he seeing the doctor?" "He's just getting old. It's normal. He's not your responsibility. You have enough on your plate." I remember the way she said it. Like I was being irrational for caring. Like love was an inconvenience. That call ended with her saying, "Take care of yourself. We've got this." But they didn't. They never did. Back then, I believed they meant well. That they were just overwhelmed. That if I pushed too hard, I'd be controlling. So I pulled back. I swallowed that concern. Buried it under duty and deployment and the desperate need to believe someone else would carry the weight for once. But I was wrong. They didn't carry anything. I sat with that memory for a long time, letting it unfold, letting it burn. Then I spoke aloud, even though Grandpa couldn't hear me, or maybe he could. "I don't think they're evil," I said quietly. "Just soft. Just the kind of people who flinch when things get heavy. Some people run from responsibility not because they're cruel, but because they never learned how to stay. They never built the muscle, never practiced the sacrifice. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. They didn't abandon him to hurt him. They abandoned him to protect themselves from the discomfort of watching someone they love fade. The trouble is, he didn't fade. He waited. He waited for someone who wouldn't flinch. And when he couldn't count on them, he counted on me. So no, I wasn't going to scream or demand apologies. I wasn't going to post about it or confront them with a trembling voice. I was going to handle it the way Grandpa taught me when I learned how to change a tire at 12 years old. With calm hands, a quiet mind, and the unshakable belief that real love shows up when it's hardest. They could keep their sunlit cocktails and ocean views. I had 25 missed calls, and not one of them deserved to be answered. I had spent 12 years dissecting battlefield intel. I'd tracked encrypted communication between insurgent cells across 2 continents. I'd written reports that decided drone flight paths and determined whether a convoy rolled out or stayed parked. But nothing prepared me for the heartbreak of opening my family's bank account and realizing I needed to treat it like an investigation. I sat at Grandpa's kitchen table, the same one where we once played dominoes on Friday nights, and opened the joint account on my laptop. The screen flickered once, then loaded. The first charge I noticed was labeled Medication for Grandpa. It was $349.82, but the merchant? Apple Store. I stared at it for a solid minute. I even clicked on the receipt to be sure I wasn't mistaken. It was for AirPods and a smart charger. Not insulin, not oxygen tubes, not prescriptions. Wireless earbuds. They had labeled luxury tech as life-saving meds. And that was just the beginning. I started scrolling. There were restaurant tabs tagged as hospital meals, ride shares marked emergency transportation, and massage services listed under post-care therapy. I felt my stomach turn. The lies weren't just sloppy, they were calculated. Cam had always been impulsive, but this was deliberate. This was financial fraud, wrapped in the excuse of family. So I did what I always do when I feel the weight of something I can't control. I made a spreadsheet. I pulled out Grandpa's files, print statements, and synced every charge from the last 60 days. Each row had a date, vendor, amount, and category. I didn't color-code it. I wasn't in the mood to make things pretty. I wasn't a forensic accountant. But I was trained in patterns, and what I saw formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Every time Grandpa had a major medical event, a fall, a spike in blood pressure, or most recently, his hospitalization, there was a corresponding luxury charge from them within 24 hours. March 12th, emergency admission, County General. March 12th, massage bliss, $275. I typed it out, paused, then underlined the 2. They had known, they had been told, and they had chosen relaxation over responsibility. I leaned back in the chair. The late afternoon sun hit the table just right, casting shadows across the Excel sheet. My fingers rested on the keyboard, but I wasn't typing. I was staring, thinking. Not about revenge, not exactly. I wasn't out for blood. That was never how Grandpa raised me. But exposure, truth, that was justice. Because if they had been reckless with money, what else had they gambled with? His medication, his bills, his safety? I opened my notes app and began recording an inventory of what needed to be checked. Medical statements, insurance records, missed home nursing appointments, any unpaid utility bills, property title access, I wrote without pause. My military brain was back online, tasking, sorting, prioritizing. Then I stopped. Right at the bottom of the March column was a flagged transaction. It was for $200 at a high-end spa, processed the exact hour Grandpa was admitted through the ER. Not just the same day, the same hour. I didn't flinch. I copied the transaction number into a side column, labeled it Time-Stamped Neglect, and saved the file with a name I didn't think I'd ever use for a family document. Evidence. I closed the laptop and folded my hands in my lap. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. I wasn't angry. I was focused. You can forgive mistakes, but not a pattern. And this was a blueprint of betrayal, line by line. I thought I knew them. I really did. But now, I knew better. I don't remember what I was wearing, or how cold it was, or even the name of the friend whose house I had been stranded at. But I do remember the sound of tires crunching through snow, and the outline of a man stepping out of a rusted pickup truck, while everyone else's parents stayed warm inside their cars. I was 11. It had been 3 days since my mom dropped me off at Mallory's house. What was supposed to be one night turned into a weekend. Then Monday came. I had no clean clothes, no lunch for school, and no answer from home. Mallory's mom grew uncomfortable. She tried calling my mom, voicemail, again and again. I stopped checking. That morning, she called my grandpa. He didn't ask questions, didn't wait for my mom to return the call. He just came. I remember standing on the porch in boots that weren't mine, watching that old green truck roll up. The front left fender was still dented from the time he hit a parking pole at the VFW. The heater barely worked, and the radio only played Johnny Cash. I used to complain about that. Not that day. He didn't scold me, didn't ask why my mother hadn't come. He just took off his scarf and wrapped it around my neck before lifting me up, not like a child, but like someone worth carrying. I was too old to be carried, really, but I didn't stop him. The snow was falling in big, slow flakes. It landed on his shoulders, clung to his eyebrows. His boots sank a little with each step, but he never faltered. He opened the truck door with one hand and set me gently in the seat, adjusting the scarf so it didn't scratch my chin. He didn't say much, but as he started the engine, he glanced over and said something I've never forgotten. "When no one's waiting for you, I will be the one at the end of the road." That's what love is, I think. Not the ones who buy you gifts or send texts with heart emojis. Not the people who are loudest when things are easy, but the ones who show up when no one else does, who pick you up in the snow, who drive you home without asking for anything back. The heater finally kicked in as we pulled away. The truck filled with warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. That was the day I stopped wishing for a different mother. That was the day I learned that blood isn't what binds us. Choices. Back in the present, I stood at the window of his hospital room, watching the sky outside darken. The spreadsheet was still open on my laptop. Every line was a cut, a choice they made to leave him behind. But here, in this moment, the weight of it gave way to something softer. I let myself cry for the first time since coming home. Not out of rage, but gratitude. Because as twisted and bruised as my family had become, one person had stood constant. He had taught me what loyalty looked like, what it sounded like in the cab of a truck on a snowy morning, what it felt like to be rescued without being blamed. And now he needed me to do the same. So I would. I'd be the one at the end of the road this time, waiting, staying, loving him the way he loved me, without question, without absence, without apology. I scheduled the Zoom call for 8 p.m. sharp, Eastern Time. No preamble, no emoji-laced invites. Just a simple subject line. Clarence's care, immediate. I logged in 10 minutes early, already dressed in uniform. Not to intimidate, though I knew it would. But because this was the last thing in my life I wanted to do, and I needed the spine that came with starch and metals. At 8:01, my mother appeared first. She wore a silk robe the color of champagne, loosely tied and wrinkled like she had just woken up from a late nap or crawled out of a cocktail haze. Her hair was curled, her lips glossed. She looked more ready for brunch than a call about her father's condition. She gave a breathy, "Oh, Gabe," finally, like I was the one who'd vanished. Cam joined next. Her camera was tilted at a high angle, soft filter on. There were tissues piled beside her elbow. She sniffled dramatically. I knew her crying voice from when she got out of parking tickets. Then Reed popped on. Shirtless, sunburnt. Behind him, the turquoise waves of Maui framed his perfectly timed beach view. He didn't even mute his mic. The sound of seagulls cut through. I waited for the fake concern, the obligatory questions. None came, so I spoke. "I'm going to make this simple," I said, voice even, eyes locked on the camera. 2 months ago, Grandpa signed full power of attorney over to me, medical and financial. That document is legally binding, recognized by the state and the hospital. My mother opened her mouth. I didn't stop. He is alive. He is fighting. And I am the only person authorized to make decisions on his behalf. So moving forward, don't call the hospital. Don't touch his accounts. Don't post vague prayers on social media like you're involved. Reed smirked, like I was overreacting. Cam's sniffles sharpened. Then Cam snapped, "You don't have a heart." There it was. That was the play. That I was cold. That military service had stripped me of sentiment, made me robotic. It had been her go-to dig since I joined the army. I didn't flinch. No, I said calmly. I just don't use my heart to feed other people's irresponsibility. Cam let out a choked laugh like she'd been slapped. Mom's eyes went wide. You can't just... I can, and I have. She tried to regain footing. He's my father. I nodded slowly. And you left him. She winced, as if the words had physical weight. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like, I asked. When you booked the spa treatment during his ER admission. When you labeled AirPods as medication. When you ignored 2 weeks of hospital calls because you were off the grid in a luxury villa. Reed finally spoke. Gabe, you're being dramatic. We didn't think it was this serious. He always bounces back. He almost didn't, I said. And none of you were there. The silence hung thick. Mom pulled her robe tighter. Cam wiped under her eyes, careful not to smudge eyeliner. Reed glanced off-screen. I let them sit in it. You weren't there when I walked into the ICU and saw him alone, wires running into his arms, breathing through a tube, I said. You weren't there when the nurse told me I was the first visitor. They stared back, speechless. I came home from deployment without telling anyone, I continued. I thought maybe I'd surprise you all. Instead, I walked into a home that felt abandoned, and a hospital room that screamed neglect. More silence. I exhaled. This isn't revenge. It's responsibility. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting him. Then I leaned closer to the screen. If you want to write a letter, I'll read it to him. If you want updates, I'll send them. But your access ends here. Cam's lip trembled. You're shutting us out. No, I said. You already shut yourselves out. I'm just locking the door behind you. Then I clicked End Meeting for All. The screen went black. And for the first time in days, I felt something like peace. The call should have been over. I had already clicked End Meeting for All. The screen had gone black. But 2 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Mom again. This time, a FaceTime. I almost declined. But something in me said to give her one last chance. I answered. Her face filled the screen, eyes brimming with something sharper than anger, wounded pride. Her silk robe was gone now, replaced by a sweatshirt. She wasn't performing this time. You think you're better than us, don't you? She snapped. Just because you wear a uniform, because he handed you some legal papers. I didn't respond. I knew what was coming. I'd heard the build-up before. He chose you because you're cold, she spat. Because he knew you wouldn't feel anything when it got hard. He didn't trust you with his love. He trusted you with logistics. Her words landed hard, not because they were true, but because at some point in my life, I might have believed them. I said nothing. She stared at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. We sat in silence for a few seconds before she muttered, He knew you don't know how to love anyone. I ended the call, no drama, no raised voice, just a tap on glass. I didn't need to hear more, because the truth was, I had already heard what mattered. It was written in Grandpa's hand. After they left him at the hospital, I'd found his old notebook tucked under the armrest of his recliner. He used to scribble in it after meals, observations, memories, sometimes shopping lists. But on the last page, the handwriting was shaky, uneven, but unmistakably his. If anything happens to me, tell Gabrielle this wasn't a burden. It was my choice. She's the only one strong enough to do the right thing, even when she'll be hated for it. I sat on the edge of the couch, the notebook open across my lap. My mother's words still ringing. Cold, heartless, loveless. I looked back at that line. Even when she'll be hated for it. He had known. He had seen me more clearly than anyone else ever had. And he hadn't feared my strength. He respected it. The world often punishes women for being steady instead of soft, for holding the line instead of holding hands. I had spent years in combat zones making split-second decisions, some that saved lives, some that haunted me. But none of them ever made me feel as exposed as hearing my own mother twist that strength into shame. I closed the notebook slowly, then I let myself remember a different time, one that told me who I really was. I was 9 the first time my tire went flat. Not on a car, on my bike. I came home dragging it behind me, sweaty and frustrated. Grandpa didn't ask me what happened. He just said, "Garage," 10 minutes. Bring gloves. I thought he was going to fix it for me. Instead, he pulled out a floor jack and laid a wrench in my hand. You're not going to wait on someone to save you, he said. Not if I can help it. I pouted. I'm just a kid. He crouched to my level. Exactly. You learn now, you'll never sit helpless in a parking lot at 25. So we started with the bike, then the truck, then changing oil, how to spot a cracked hose, what to do when someone lies straight to your face and tries to talk you out of your own instincts. He didn't raise me to be hard. He raised me to survive. And now, because of that, I could make sure he didn't just survive, but was protected. Safe. Honored in the final stretch of his life. Not because I didn't feel, but because I felt enough to stay. To do the job no one else would. To love him the way he had always loved me. Without apology, without weakness, without condition. I sat at the old oak dining table, the one where Grandpa used to read the Sunday paper while I did my homework. The grain of the wood was worn smooth, like it had absorbed decades of meals, arguments, and quiet apologies. Tonight, it was buried under stacks of paper, bank statements, notarized power of attorney forms, hospital invoices, screenshots of Cam's vacation posts, and every digital receipt labeled as Grandpa's medication. I wasn't angry anymore. Not the sharp, shaking kind of anger that made my pulse race. That part had burned off. What remained was something heavier, quieter, clarity, the kind that comes after a storm when you finally see how much damage was done. I took a slow sip of coffee, my third cup, and looked at the color-coded spreadsheet I'd finished the night before. Every fraudulent charge was highlighted in red. Every unpaid hospital bill was flagged in yellow. Every legal document with my signature was neatly scanned and labeled. I'd built a paper trail so tight, even my mother's smoothest excuse wouldn't slip through. At the center of the table sat a single manila envelope. On the front, in black marker, I'd written 2 words, for court. I slid the last printed statement inside. Then I added Grandpa's journal, the pages where he wrote about the missed calls, the lies, the days he felt like a burden in his own house. He hadn't written those words for court, but I knew they carried more truth than anything they would say on the stand. I sealed the envelope. The sound of the glue pressing down felt final. I didn't slam my hands on the table. I didn't scream or rehearse speeches. Those things didn't matter now. What mattered was action. I pulled out my phone and drafted a short message to Marcus, my attorney. Package ready, filing first thing tomorrow. He responded within a minute. Understood. Court date will be fast-tracked. You did good, Gabe. Did good. I wasn't sure if it felt good. It felt necessary. I glanced toward the hallway, where Grandpa's old coat still hung on the rack. For a moment, I saw myself at 11 again, curled up on that same coat while he drank late-night coffee, telling me that doing the right thing rarely feels comfortable. The right thing, he used to say, is usually the one that costs you. This one was costing me family. But what's family if they abandon the one who raised them? If they turn someone's last years into a transaction? I turned off the dining light and stood with the envelope in my hand. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. It smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish, familiar, comforting, like Grandpa's steady voice. As I walked toward the front door, I didn't feel like a soldier or a granddaughter. I felt like both. And that, I realized, was exactly why he chose me. Not because I was cold, but because I could stay calm when everyone else turned away. I set the envelope by the door, ready for pickup. My phone buzzed with another missed call from Mom. I didn't answer. The envelope would. It was past midnight when I finally decided to clean out Grandpa's desk. Not to purge it, just to feel close to him again. His scent lingered in the drawers, cedar, coffee, and something faintly medicinal. His handwriting danced across envelopes, grocery lists, tiny sticky notes folded into quarters. Then I found the envelope. It wasn't sealed. Just tucked between a copy of his will and an old Veterans Affairs form. My name was written on the front in careful cursive. For Gabrielle, if I don't get to say it out loud. I hesitated. My breath caught. I opened it with the same reverence I gave mission briefings in Kandahar. This wasn't strategy. It was truth. His letter was dated 4 months before he collapsed, long before the hospital, before the silence, before the beach photos and the missed calls. He had written, My girl, if you're reading this, then I probably didn't get to tell you this in person. I want you to know there was never a second I doubted putting you in charge. Not because you're perfect, because you're steady. You'll do what's right, even when it's hard, even when it's thankless. That's what leadership looks like. That's what love looks like too. But I want to ask you one thing. Don't let this make you bitter. Don't let my mistakes turn into yours. I wanted to leave something behind for your mom and for Cam, not because they deserved it, but because they still need to learn. Maybe money will buy them time to change. You? You don't need much. You're already more than I could have hoped for. Just don't forget, being strong is good. But being kind when you don't have to be. That's something rarer, and that's who I raised. Love you always, Grandpa. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, holding the letter like it had weight. Like ink and paper could break ribs. My fingers ran over the words again and again. I read it 4 times before the meaning fully landed. He hadn't chosen me to punish them. He had chosen me to be better than them. And here I was, filing lawsuits, cutting ties, building walls so high they couldn't see the person they used to call daughter or sister. I thought I was protecting him. But maybe I'd started protecting the wound. For weeks I had walked around like a soldier in full armor, focused, efficient, righteous. But this letter stripped all that away. It was never about revenge, not for him. I leaned back in the old desk chair, which creaked like it had secrets of its own. The letter still shook in my hands. I thought about the last time we played checkers together. He always let me think I was winning, until he'd flip the board with one quiet move. Not to show dominance, but to remind me the game was never about the win. It was about how you played. I had been playing to win, but he never wanted me to win like this. Not by becoming the very thing he tried to steer me away from. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You didn't want justice, you wanted grace," and I had missed that. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I slid it into the back pocket of my notebook, the same one I carried through every deployment, the same one where I wrote after my first field casualty, where I scribbled down promises to myself that I wouldn't lose who I was. Maybe it was time to rewrite a few of those promises. Maybe the next battle wasn't in courtrooms or bank accounts, but in the part of me that still believed I could love without losing control. Because Grandpa hadn't just left me with responsibility. He'd left me a blueprint, and I was finally starting to see it. There's a weight no one tells you about, a different kind of heaviness that settles in your chest, not when you lose a fight, but when you realize winning might cost more than it's worth. That night, I sat alone on Grandpa's porch. The wind was sharp, early autumn. I didn't turn the porch light on. I didn't need to see the world. I needed to feel what was happening inside me. If I pushed forward with the lawsuit, the court would likely rule in my favor. The documents were airtight. The misuse of Grandpa's money, the neglect, the fake receipts, clear as day. I'd expose them, strip away their stories, their masks, maybe even make headlines. And then what? They'd lose access to everything, and I'd lose them for good. Maybe that was supposed to feel like justice, but all I felt was hollow, because deep down I knew they weren't evil, just weak. And weakness is so much harder to punish than cruelty, because weakness begs for understanding, even when it doesn't deserve forgiveness. If I destroyed them, would Grandpa be proud? Or disappointed? I didn't sleep that night. My mind looped like a broken reel, half court filings, half childhood echoes. Until sometime around 4 a.m, a memory came back so vivid it sat me upright. I was maybe 7 or 8, learning to ride my first real bike. Grandpa insisted I learn without training wheels. I remember wobbling across the gravel path behind our house, gripping the handlebars like they'd save me. Then I fell, hard. I scraped my knees, bit my lip, tears burning hot. He didn't rush over, didn't pick me up. He stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, eyes steady. He said, "Get up." I whimpered. "It hurts." He nodded. "Of course it does, but you'll be fine." I stayed down, so he added softer this time. "No one lives a good life by only knowing how to stand alone, Gabby, but you have to learn to stand first. That's the deal." And I did. Eventually, I got up, rode straight back to him, and he never said good job. He just tousled my hair and walked inside. That moment had defined so much of my life, my independence, my silence in pain, my refusal to ask for help. But now, I realized the second half of what he said. No one lives a good life by only knowing how to stand alone. That was the part I had missed. I opened the laptop and clicked into my legal folder. The file labeled lawsuit, final glowed back at me. My hand hovered over the send button. I didn't press it. Instead, I opened a new document. It was a contract, not a lawsuit. A distribution agreement, outlining how Grandpa's remaining estate would be divided. But with conditions. Cam and Mom would receive their portions. Only if they completed a checklist, settle all unpaid medical debts, attend 3 financial counseling sessions, commit in writing to monthly visits or care check-ins with a registered elder care agency for at least a year, issue a written acknowledgement stored with our attorney of their role in Grandpa's decline. It wasn't vengeance, it was responsibility, and if they refused, I still had every piece of evidence. I'd just chosen not to lead with fire. I saved the document, printed it, sealed it in a new envelope, same table, same black marker. This time, the label read, "For accountability." I still believed in justice. But I didn't believe in destroying what was already broken just to feel powerful. Maybe Grandpa hadn't wanted me to fight harder. Maybe he wanted me to see deeper. Because sometimes, choosing not to destroy is the strongest thing you can do. The phone rang just past noon. I let it go once, twice. The third time, I picked up. Gabrielle, my mother's voice came through, thinned by static but thick with practiced emotion. I got the letter, the agreement. Silence stretched between us. I read it twice, she continued. It's cold, legal, like you're handing me homework instead of grace. I took a breath. It's not grace, Mom. It's responsibility. She sighed, a long theatrical exhale. You don't understand how hard it was. He always made you his favorite. You got the medals, the praise, the strength. Me? I was just the daughter who disappointed him. The words were meant to wound. Or maybe explain. I couldn't tell anymore. Did you ever stay with him one night? I asked. Just one, in the hospital, on the days when he couldn't lift a glass of water. She didn't answer, so I continued. I flew home from Afghanistan with 42 hours' notice. You had 4 months. What did you do with them? Another pause. Then she whispered. I couldn't watch him die. No, I said, steady. You just didn't want to be reminded you were still alive. Click. She hung up first. That night, Cam posted a story on Instagram. She was in a dimly lit room, eyes glossy with well-angled tears, soft piano music playing underneath. The caption read, "Families are complicated. Sometimes people don't see the pain behind the silence." Thousands of likes, dozens of comments. Stay strong, girl. Sending hugs. You deserve peace. Not one mention of Grandpa. Not one word about what she'd done or hadn't done. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I simply took a screenshot and added it to my folder. Receipts, just in case. Reed, on the other hand, never responded. No call, no email. Just a user not found when I checked his profile. He'd blocked me for sending terms to accept inheritance from the man who had paid his tuition, who once sold his antique rifle collection to cover Reed's DUI fine. I sat on the hospital bench that evening, watching Grandpa's monitors blink steadily, rhythmically, the kind of quiet that didn't ask for anything. I tried, I whispered, not to him, to myself. I tried to find the space between justice and mercy, between what I felt and what I feared I'd become. And I realized this wasn't about them. Forgiveness was never for the ones who hurt you. It's for the version of you who deserves peace, not the soldier, not the executor, not the granddaughter, just the woman who stayed. I remembered the letter Grandpa never sent, the one where he said I didn't need much, that I was already strong. I hated that strength was the thing people admired most in me, because sometimes it just felt like an excuse for everyone else to be weak. I leaned back, head against the wall, eyes closed. There were no more battles to fight. No one left to convince, just me and a man slowly slipping away in a room no one else thought to visit. And for once, that felt like enough. The building wasn't impressive, just a squat one-story brick structure tucked behind a church. barely marked by a faded sign that read, Evergreen Veterans Home. But it was clean, quiet, honest. I stood by the entryway for a moment, fingers gripping the folder in my hand. The paperwork that would make it official. Clarence Foundation. Named after the man who once told me not to wait for the world to fix itself. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and rubbing alcohol. Not unpleasant, just sterile. A receptionist glanced up. "You're the one from the VA?" I nodded. "Yes, Gabrielle Travers. I'm here to see Hank Decker." She smiled, then leaned toward the hallway, yelling, "Hank, your girl's here." A moment later, a wiry man with a cane and an American flag pin shuffled in, eyes twinkling under thick brows. "You don't look a day older than that scared kid Clarence brought to base in '99, he said. I laughed, something I hadn't done in days. "You must have been wearing rose-colored glasses." Hank and I sat in the common room, where a few men dozed in recliners. The hum of a small TV filled the background with some '70s sitcom rerun. "He used to talk about you," Hank said softly. "All the time. Said you'd either become a general or a judge. And either way, you'd scare the hell out of the guilty." I handed him the folder. He opened it slowly, hands shaking but eyes steady. "What's this?" he asked. "Funding," I said. "Resources for vets who've been left behind, literally or legally. Medical access, caseworkers, legal aid for POA disputes, grief counseling, small grants for those kicked out of homes by family, even housing stipends." He blinked, stunned. "You did all this?" I shook my head. "I'm just the one who showed up. He was the one who planted the idea. I just followed through." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Clarence didn't raise you to be comfortable. He raised you to be right. There's a difference." I swallowed hard. Outside, I could hear a wind chime clink in the breeze. For a second, I imagined Grandpa sitting out there, hands folded, cap tilted back, just watching the sun dip low like he used to. The foundation wouldn't fix the hole they left in him, or in me, but it would stop that hole from spreading. We walked through the hallways slowly, Hank introducing me to other residents. Men with half-formed sentences, wheelchairs with photos taped to the arms, veterans whose names had been lost to families too tired to care. One man called me director when he saw my badge. I corrected him gently. "I'm not the director, I'm just here." But truthfully, I didn't hate the title, because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting, I was building, not burning down. I stopped at a door labeled Therapy Room, where a counselor sat in a circle with 3 older vets. One was crying. No one told him to stop. That's the world Grandpa wanted me to help build. A world where people weren't left alone just because they became inconvenient. Hank paused beside me, his cane tapping gently on the tile. "You know," he said, "Clarence told me once, when he saw you patch up a dog's paw at age 10 with duct tape and gauze, that you were gonna grow up solving wounds people couldn't even see." I looked at him, my voice soft. "He ever tell you I resented him sometimes? That I hated how hard he made me be?" "Oh yeah," Hank chuckled. "Said you'd either hate him for life or thank him at his grave. Said he was fine with either, as long as you turned out whole." I closed my eyes, then opened them again, more certain than before. Forgiveness wasn't for Mom, or Cam, or Reed. It wasn't for them to deserve. It was for me to stop carrying the weight of their weakness. The Clarence Foundation wasn't justice, it was legacy. And I was finally ready to protect it. The machines didn't scream. No alarms, no flashing lights. Just a slow dimming of the rhythm I'd memorized for weeks. Inhale, pause, exhale, then again, until there was no again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside him on the same plastic chair I'd dragged in every evening, wrapped in the same green blanket from his recliner at home. It smelled like dust and aftershave. It smelled like him. The lights above flickered once, and his breathing softened, like the weight of his lungs had let go of the fight without telling me. I leaned forward. My hands trembled, not in fear but in recognition. This was it. This was how strength left a body, not with a scream, but with stillness. I reached for his brush, the old wooden one with the missing bristles. I'd packed it from his drawer the first night I took over, not knowing why. Now I knew. I brushed back what little white hair he had left, smoothing it neatly behind his ears. He would have grumbled at the fuss. I could already hear it in my head. "Gabby, this isn't a parade." Still, I buttoned his favorite blue shirt, the one with the stitched pocket. He wore it every 4th of July and on the day I graduated from basic. He said it was his lucky shirt. Tonight, it would be his leaving shirt. I tucked the collar in. Then I placed the small, worn leather notebook into his hands, the one with the bent corners and pencil-smudged margins. I had reread it 3 times the night before. Every word was already carved into me. But I left a note of my own on the inside cover. "I saw it, Grandpa. I saw everything. I understand now. Love isn't loud, it's the act of staying." I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I sat for an hour, maybe 2, with my hand resting over his, warm, turning cool. When the nurse finally stepped in, she paused in the doorway. Her face said she knew. She didn't rush, just whispered, "Take your time." And I did. I traced the veins on his hands that had changed tires and packed lunches and pointed me toward a life beyond survival. Hands that had once carried me through a snowstorm. Now they carried nothing. But they had given me everything. I stood up slowly, joints stiff from sitting too long in one position. But my mind, it was still. For the first time in months, maybe years. At the door, I glanced back. The window behind his bed looked east, toward the first light of morning. The sun was breaking gently over the rooftops, catching the edge of the tree outside. The same tree we'd sat under every summer. Him on the bench, me on the ground with a book. I remembered something he told me once. When I asked what made a soldier brave, he said, "It's not about not being afraid. It's about knowing who you'd sit beside when the war's over, and building a bench there." I whispered, "You built it, Grandpa." Then I walked out of the room, not broken, just emptied. So I could fill myself again, with the quiet kind of strength, the kind he carried his whole life, the kind he left for me. A week later, I returned to the park. Same oak tree, same rusted swing set creaking in the distance. Same patch of sunlight that always seemed to fall perfectly over the bench. Only now, there was a new plaque bolted to the wooden slats. Simple, weatherproof, and quiet in its truth. "In memory of Clarence Briggs, for the ones who show up." That was who he was. Not just a man who stayed, but someone who showed up, without ceremony, without applause, without asking for anything in return. And that was the legacy I chose to carry. I sat on the bench, alone, but not lonely. Across the park, kids were running, their sneakers thumping against grass and laughter echoing high and full. A dog barked. The wind tugged gently at my jacket. And the swing next to the tree moved just enough to make me look like someone had just stepped off it. For a moment, I let myself pretend that if I turned my head fast enough, I'd catch him sitting next to me. Fedora tilted back, a peppermint in his hand, one eyebrow raised like he always did when I was overthinking things. But of course, it was just the wind. Still, it didn't feel empty. In fact, for the first time in a long time, it felt finished. Not like a door slamming shut, more like a window opening somewhere else. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new email from the foundation. A donor had contributed anonymously. Enough to fund 5 new legal cases. 5 veterans, 5 names, 5 people who wouldn't have to fight alone. I looked up at the sky, squinting into the light. "I'm still showing up, Grandpa," I whispered. I don't know if he heard me, but I think he would have smiled. Not because I forgave them, but because I did it without needing their apology. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a transaction. It's not about who deserves it. It's about freedom. Mine. Because I didn't win, and I didn't lose. I just chose to stay. To remain standing when others ran. To pick up what they dropped. And to protect the piece of him that still lives in me. That will always live in me. So before we say goodbye, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of something that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly beneath the tree until you're ready to sit down, take a breath, and finally come home. Take care. We'll see you in the next story.